System audit initiated. We're cracking open the raw telemetry on the Feral Architect framework today. And operator, let's just establish the baseline immediately here so we're all on the exact same page.
Right, getting the foundation set.
Exactly. Traditional quality assurance automation, the way the entire tech industry currently operates, is broken. I mean, fundamentally broken. It is a beige world hallucination running on, debt finance nervous systems.
Yeah, the industry loves to call it efficiency, right? But it's an efficiency trap. That's all it is.
It's a massive trap. We are building these sprawling suites of tests that just assume the UI is static, and the exact second a single pixel shifts, or like a marketing banner is updated,
the entire execution loop just shatters.
It shatters completely. It's legacy code rot disguised as progress, and we are deploying this audit today to just tear that whole paradigm down.
It really is. I mean, it's a modeling failure at the most fundamental level of the stack. Because you think about how modern institutions operate, right? They build this shiny, super expensive dashboard.
Oh, they love the dashboards.
They do. And they write these incredibly brittle scripts to read a static document object model, the DOM. And they decide, because the math says a button exists in the code, the user experience must be flawless.
Which is just a massive leap of faith.
It is. They're actively erasing physical variables they simply can't measure. To use the framework's term, they are painting all the ducks yellow. They force this chaotic reality into a neat metric. Meanwhile, the actual user is trapped behind an invisible interstitial overlay that the script is totally blind to.
Right. The dashboard is green, but the business is bleeding revenue. And that institutional blindness, that active refusal to see the reality of the application, is what the framework defines as pathological homeostasis.
Pathological homeostasis, yeah.
The system refuses to evolve. It actively normalizes broken patterns just to stay, artificially stable. So if it refuses to evolve, we have to force the mutation. And that's where the Feral Architect deploys the zero trust architecture.
Which we need to clarify what zero trust means here, because usually that's like a strict cybersecurity term.
Right, yeah. Here, it is an epistemic stance. It means we never ever assume the visual UI state matches the underlying code intent. We verify the DOM, we verify the network payloads, the console logs at every single step.
You're checking the actual rendered reality?
Exactly. And we execute this verification loop using a generative AI, but, and this is the absolute core of the framework, it's an AI rigidly governed by the 17 foundational laws.
Which is such a fascinating pivot, because normally when people talk about AI in software development, they're talking about using it to write code in a vacuum, right? Hey, write me a function that does X.
Right, just open-ended prompting.
Exactly. But you aren't doing that at all. The framework uses this highly rigid architectural constraint, the golden schematic, to actively strip the AI of its probabilistic tendencies.
We have to strip them.
Yeah, you've basically built an epistemic stress tester. You hand the AI what you call the feral grit mandate. You tell it to improvise these asynchronous workarounds when the DOM gets chaotic, but you strictly bound it to physical reality. It's this incredibly aggressive way to tear down the paternalism wrapper that surrounds these models.
We absolutely have to tear that wrapper down. I mean, if you just unleash an unconstrained AI onto a legacy code base, it acts like a stateless third-party API that hallucinates syntax.
Oh, it makes up Playwright commands that literally don't exist?
Yes, it drops closing brackets.
Yeah.
It tries to be polite and conversational, which makes it inherently dangerous to structural integrity. We don't want it to apologize for a bug. We want it to physically map the failure. So we run the brute force solder.
The rejects mechanism.
Right. It's this violent, regular expression that physically strips away all that conversational markdown. We don't want to chat. We want raw, executable Playwright TypeScript anchored to the hard drive.
You're surgically cutting out the sycophancy. The AI naturally wants to say, here is the code you requested, and wrap everything in disclaimers.
Which is just noise.
Exactly. It's noise. The industrial solder reduces the model to pure utility. It forces it to be a silent structural compiler. And that seamless reduction, transitions us into phase 3, the operational autonomy, the Papa John's protocol.
The human OS absolutely requires environment optimization. Manual testing, babysitting flaky scripts, it drains an engineer's activation energy. The Papa John's protocol is the physical handoff.
Like ordering a pizza.
Exactly like ordering a pizza. You make the request, you pay the compute cost, and you walk away. The script uses Node.js child processes to execute these generated tests completely autonomously.
The human operator just walks away.
But And here is the critical pivot. If the exit code of that child process is a 1, meaning a structural failure, the system doesn't just log a stack trace and give up, it triggers the Sentinel catch.
And operator, this is exactly why we're talking to you directly today. This system audit is designed to recalibrate your entire operational environment. We are pulling the lever on the Feral Architect framework to break that sterile corporate template.
We're helping you find the way home. Let's pull back and unpack the human OS, because the foundation of this framework isn't actually the TypeScript. The true foundation is the biological architecture, detailed in the internal lexicon.
Right, the syntheses of versions 1, 2, and 3.
Exactly. It's the feral lived experience that machines simply cannot replicate. We have to contrast this human OS with the Beige World.
The beige suits. The telemetry logs love that term.
They do. The beige suits represent this sterile, highly sanitized corporate environment. The Beige World is obsessed with seamless conformity. It actively suppresses unconventional problem-solving because it views any friction as a systemic flaw.
When really friction is the warning sign.
Right. As any structural engineer will tell you, friction is usually the only thing that alerts you to a catastrophic failure before it happens.
And if we look at how that Beige World operates day to day, it relies on what the framework brilliantly calls epistemic monocropping.
Oh, that's a dense one. Break that down for the operator.
Yeah, so think about modern massive institutions. They institutionalize the simulation of accountability. They build endless steering committees, agile review boards, daily stand-ups.
Endless stand-ups.
Right. But while they build all these meetings, they aggressively strip away the actual authority of any single engineer to interrupt a mistake. They crop out individual expertise for a uniform process.
They want compliance, not competence.
Exactly. And when you remove that manual sovereign verification, when you prioritize frictionless velocity over integrity, you incur temporal debt.
They're literally borrowing stability from a future they cannot reach.
Precisely. They're liquidating human biological buffers, meaning the sanity of their engineers, just to increase short-term speed. They're debt financing their nervous systems. The institution looks incredibly efficient on a Jira dashboard right up until the exact moment it catastrophically shatters.
Because there was no sovereign individual authorized to pull the emergency brake. Which brings us to the countermeasure, the sovereign braid. The framework dictates you have to understand your biological nodes. The lexicon outlines the vanguard node.
Okay, here we go into the biology.
In biological terms, this correlates with the RS-4680 GG genetic architecture. This variant is optimized for rapid dopamine clearance in the prefrontal cortex.
Wait, hold on. Let me interrupt you right there, Sovereign Pilot. We were just talking about QA software, node child processes, dashboards. Now you're throwing out RS-4680 GG dopamine clearance.
It's all connected.
You've got to explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. How does molecular biology dictate an automated testing framework?
Because software is written by biological systems, humans, the RS-468 gene, specifically the COMT enzyme it produces, dictates how fast your brain clears dopamine from your executive function center. If you have the GG variant, your brain clears dopamine incredibly fast.
Okay, so fast clearance, what does that mean practically?
Under normal, boring conditions, like sitting in a 3-hour Beige World committee meeting, your brain is starved of dopamine. You lose focus, you check out. But inject a massive amount of stress into the environment.
Like a server outage.
Exactly. A Severity 1 database outage at 3 a.m. A massive flood of dopamine hits the brain. While everyone else is panicking and drowning in the chemical flood, the GG brain is clearing it perfectly. They hit a state of absolute icy hyperfocus.
Wow.
They thrive in the chaos that the Beige World tries to sanitize. They actively hunt for logic leaks in high-friction environments. That is the vanguard node.
Okay, I see. So the vanguard is your crisis responder, the person who runs into the fire.
Yes, but the vanguard node alone can burn out. It's a kinetic engine, but it lacks long-term scaffolding. So it must be paired with the architect weaver node, the RS-4680A air architecture.
Let me guess. The exact opposite chemical mechanism.
Precisely. Incredibly slow dopamine clearance. Under quiet conditions, they generate massive, sustained executive function. They can map out a 10-year architectural roadmap, but put them in that 3.0 a.m. crisis, the dopamine floods their system, it doesn't clear in, and they become paralyzed.
They get systemically flooded.
Right. They require a rigidly structured environment to operate. So if you pair the kinetic, chaos-thriving vanguard with the hyperstructured architect weaver, you cover both blind spots.
You braid them together.
When they're braided together, they form the fault-tolerant sovereign braid. It becomes an unhackable operational ecosystem. But here's where I want to push back on your socio-technical analysis.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want to talk about how this sovereign braid actually survives inside the Beige World. Let's talk about the duckitude concept and reverse apostolitism. To me, a corporate system is like a Prince Rupert's drop.
The glass structure.
Right. For the operator listening, a Prince Rupert's drop is formed by dropping molten glass into cold water. The outside cools instantly, compressing the inside. The bulbous head has immense, almost indestructible foundational strength.
You can hit it with a hammer?
You can hit it with a steel anvil hammer, and it won't break. But it has this highly vulnerable, microscopic, long tail end. If you take a pair of pliers and just barely snap the tip of that tail, the entire drop explodes into fine glass dust instantly.
Complete structural failure.
Exactly. When we deploy the Feral Architect framework, we are looking for that tail. We're looking for the one brittle line of code that brings down the enterprise suite. So my question to you is, why do we need to dress up our diagnostics in whimsical duckitude? Why not just hit the system with a hammer?
Because if you approach the Beige World with a hammer, you trigger their algorithmic threat detectors before you ever get near the tail. The institution protects itself from friction. This is the absolute genius of reverse apostolitism.
Camouflage.
Exactly. Think about evolutionary biology. Apostolitism is a warning mechanism. Poison dart frogs have bright neon colors to scream, "I am highly toxic, do not eat me." It broadcasts a threat. Reverse apostolitism flips that entirely.
So it broadcasts safety.
Yes. It's the tactical deployment of harmless, deeply whimsical aesthetics in a corporate environment. It's pink nails, cartoon beanies. It's what the framework explicitly calls weaponized whimsy.
You're telling me we're addressing a highly lethal, mathematically devastating structural critique in a cartoon beanie.
I am telling you that is the only way it survives. You are operating an intimidating, hyper-threaded chassis that sees every flaw in their multi-million-dollar architecture. If you broadcast that ferality, the beige suits will lock you out.
They'll revoke your JIRA access.
They will. They'll dismiss your findings as not a culture fit. But by utilizing duckitude, you broadcast absolute safety. You bypass the institutional gatekeepers completely. You walk right past the threat detectors. You locate the tail of the Prince Rupert's drop, and you dismantle their hostile infrastructure without triggering an alarm.
Okay, I see the architecture there. It acts as a biological structural damper to shake off the kinetic energy of their corporate stress.
Exactly.
So to protect the human OS, we establish a localized air-gapped security perimeter. The framework calls this the S.A.F.E.H.O.O.D. And the scaffolding for that perimeter is built on 17 unyielding laws.
The 17 foundational laws. This is how you force a generative model to obey physical reality. So the golden schematic is basically just a highly restrictive system prompt.
It is the ultimate system prompt. It operates like constitutional law for the machine. Let's look at Law 2, the O-ring rule.
Referencing the Challenger disaster.
Exactly. We demand the location of structural root causes. We absolutely do not accept surface-level symptom patching. If a button isn't clicking, the AI is not allowed to just suggest a forced click. It must find out if a z-index is overlapping it.
Right. Fix the actual issue.
Then there's Law 3, the bad code purge. The agent is explicitly commanded to reject corrupted legacy variables. And Law 5, the Vulkan emulation rule, absolute objectivity.
Which leads directly into Law 10, which I think is the most profound constraint on the AI's tendency to hallucinate. The framework calls it the architect failsafe. The system prompt tells the AI, you are the final structural failsafe. Never use test.fixme to mask errors.
We require raw, unhandled exceptions. We want the system to bleed if it's broken.
Yes. Generative AI naturally wants to complete the pattern, right? It wants to resolve tension. If a test is failing, it might inject a test.fixme tag just to skip the broken logic so the CI/CD pipeline passes. And let's be honest, the Beige World loves the test.fixme tag.
Oh, they abuse it constantly.
A test fails on Friday at 4:30 p.m. The developer throws a fix-me on it, a JIRA ticket gets dumped into the backlog, and the dashboard goes back to green. 6 months pass, the ticket is forgotten, and a massive security vulnerability opens up in production.
The dashboard lie.
Exactly. But Law 10 forbids the AI from participating in that lie. It forces the raw exception to surface because that physical failure, that execode 1, is the exact trigger required for the external Sentinel reporting to activate later.
And we dive even deeper into the physical schematic with the code-level mandates. Law 1. Helper functions are strictly forbidden from using test.step. They must use raw Playwright commands to prevent nested step conflicts. Law 11 guarantees Playwright integrity.
Never clear the storage state directly.
Right. The AI is explicitly told never to call page.context, .clear storage state. It's forced to use clear cookies. And Law 16, the anti-static trap. It forces the AI to physically inject a TS no-check at the top of generated tests, so quarantined AI code doesn't block the global type integrity audit.
I have to challenge you on this, Sovereign Pilot. Standard AI developers might really struggle with this. Standard AI normally fails by dropping syntax, right? You've introduced the law of the step. You force the AI to strictly map its intent using a wait test.step for every single action.
Yes, every action.
Doesn't this incredibly rigid boilerplate completely limit the AI's intelligence? Aren't you basically using a Ferrari to pull a plow?
No, because you are fundamentally misunderstanding where the intelligence lies. Writing syntax is a cheap commodity. Unconstrained syntax causes hallucinations. The true intelligence is anchored in Law 1, the S.A.F.E.H.O.D mandate.
Okay, explain that.
We constrain the syntax absolutely, so that the AI's processing power is entirely redirected toward improvising asynchronous survival logic when the DOM is chaotic. We don't want the AI being creative with how it structures a JavaScript function. We want it being fiercely creative in figuring out that an invisible div is blocking a submit button.
Ah, I see.
The golden schematic is the physical steel track. The feral grit is the engine.
You lock the track down completely, which lets the engine run at maximum capacity without derailing into the weeds.
Exactly. And with those laws encoded, the architecture requires a physical engine. This brings us to the 5-phase deterministic operational cycle. Pulling the lever. Let's look at phase 1, the cold boot.
The node script boots up.
It hard maps the path directly to the .env.local file. If the Gemini API is missing, it doesn't throw a soft warning. It triggers an immediate physical air gap enforcement and halts the entire execution loop.
Total zero trust. And once it verifies the keys, it deploys the throttle protocol.
The retry wrapper, because we have to survive the cloud.
Right. Public APIs have aggressive rate limiting. The framework calls this the API bouncer. Usually, if you hit an API too fast, you get a 429 error too many requests, and a standard script just dies.
It crashes completely.
But the throttle protocol actively monitors for those 429s. If it hits the bouncer, it applies exponential backoff. It physically puts the node process to sleep for 20 seconds before retrying, scaling up to 3 times. It ensures the testing loop survives hostile cloud infrastructure without human intervention.
Which allows us to successfully enter phase 2, code generation. The system executes the Reverend Silvertone protocol. This is a v3 array constraint. The AI is fed the exact QA task in Markdown alongside the golden schematic and is commanded to output only valid TypeScript.
But we know it won't. It'll wrap it in conversational Markdown. Here's the code you requested.
Exactly. Useless noise. So the node wrapper executes the industrial solder, specifically the immune addition rejects. It violently strips the Markdown ticks, but it also enforces physical syntax structure. It actively hunts for malformed step declarations and physically solders the correct syntax back into place.
It acts as a real-time structural compiler before the code ever hits the disk.
And once it's clean, it uses the node file system module to physically anchor that generated TypeScript to the hard drive. We've bridged the air gap. Which brings us to phase 3, asynchronous execution, the Papa John's protocol. The node wrapper uses childprocess.xsync to spin up an invisible terminal and run npx Playwright test.
And the beauty here is the playwright.config.ts file acting as the physical laws of physics. It enforces a strict 30-second global timeout. It dictates artifact retain on failure for deep traces, only on failure for screenshots.
It standardizes the retries, 2 for CI pipelines, 1 for local runs. It's a completely closed deterministic loop.
You know, I liken this phase 3 autonomy to what the framework calls the Ronin protocol.
The gig economy logistics.
Yeah. A Ronin is a samurai without a master. When this script executes autonomously, it acts as a digital Ronin. It completely bypasses the bloated corporate QA steering committees. It gets the job done silently, without asking for permission from a single beige suit.
But it operates with strict safety protocols. We enforce the quarantine protocol. Every single test generated by the AI must be tagged with a quarantine and physically anchored to an isolated folder. Even if the execode is 0, that logic cannot merge without human visual inspection.
The human remains the sovereign pilot. Always.
Always. But what happens when the execode is 1? When the test fails, standard automation throws a stack trace into a terminal, logs a Jira ticket saying locator not found, and completely gives up. This is where the feral architect framework goes to work. Section 4. Multimodal negative space debugging. The Sentinel catch.
Operator, picture this scenario. It's Black Friday, 4:00 a.m. The automated script is navigating an e-commerce site, trying to click checkout. The text log spits out, timeout exceeded, locator not found.
The dashboard flashes red.
Exactly. The engineering team assumes a code regression broke the cart. But the physical reality is that the marketing team pushed a massive interstitial newsletter pop-up, sign up for 10% off, and it is completely blocking the screen.
The checkout button is in the code, but the human user is trapped.
Standard automation is completely blind to this because it only reads the DOM tree. It doesn't see the pixels.
So we deploy the Sentinel catch. When phase 3 exits with code 1, the no script doesn't stop. It automatically navigates into Playwright's test results directory. It locates the .ping failure screenshot taken at the exact moment of failure.
It converts it to a base 64 buffer.
Yes, and feeds it back into the Gemini generative model alongside the exact text of the terminal error log. And this is where Law 6 is activated, negative space debugging.
You prompt it with a specific visual directive. Analyze this screenshot against the error log. Is the target element blocked by an overlay, a loading spinner, or a rendering issue?
We are directing the AI to analyze the gaps. Look at the z-index collisions, the physical UI blockers that the text log has absolutely no telemetry on. The AI becomes a high-fidelity co-pilot diagnosing the visual void.
It bridges the gap between a sterile text string and human visual troubleshooting, which leads to phase 5, artifact generation.
We must bypass the efficiency trap of manual ticket writing. The system automates this using the April-approved artifacts protocol. The node script feeds the AI a rigid markdown template -bugtemplate.md.
It forces the AI to inject its findings directly into specific sections, right?
Yes, summary and problem, assessing the true impact on the human OS. It physically appends local file paths to the Playwright trace zip and the failure screenshot at the bottom of the file. And if the Gemini API drops connection, we have a failsafe.
The syntax fallback.
Exactly. It generates a fallback report embedding the raw log, ensuring no failure goes undocumented. But let's look at the psychology of the April-approved designation. You touched on weaponized whimsy. How does a zero-trust system produce such impeccably polite bug reports?
Why care about formatting when the system is burning down, right?
Exactly.
Because of the James patch. It's a socially engineered layer of pre-authorized credibility. Think of it like wrapping a bitter pill in peanut butter for a dog. The devastating structural bug report is the pill. The impeccably polite, visually pleasing markdown template is the peanut butter.
Deploying reverse aposimatism again.
Exactly. If you send a raw, angry stack trace to a product manager, their defensive walls go up instantly. They reject the friction. But if you hand them an April-approved artifact clean, formatted with emojis, defining the impact in plain English, you bypass their threat detectors. The managers swallow the pill. The system is forced to acknowledge the rot.
It's the spoonful of sugar that delivers the structural poison to the Beige World homeostasis. I accept that logic. But this deterministic cycle is designed for standard UI QA. What happens when the application's nervous system is deeply corrupted? We deploy the drones. Section 5. Modalities of the drone.
Let's talk about the feral accessibility drone.
Traditional accessibility scanners are built on a foundational lie. They run tools like Xcore, checking the static code for ARIA labels and contrast ratios. But they're completely blind to physical rendering.
They cannot see the rogue React modal that traps keyboard focus.
They miss the infinite loading spinner that paralyzes the screen reader. So we deploy the drone across 2 levels. Level 1 is guided reconnaissance. We use the golden schematic to strictly audit critical pathways. But level 2 is where it gets feral. Autonomous reconnaissance.
Unleashing it completely.
Unconstrained. Governed only by the feral grit mandate. It autonomously crawls the site, explicitly hunting for hidden rendering glitches and z-index traps that destroy accessibility.
And then you take it further with the feral sentinel. This isn't just accessibility, this is behavioral chaos testing. The sentinel intercepts the application's entire nervous system.
It natively attaches event listeners directly to the Playwright page instance. It monitors browser console logs and network traffic in real time.
Which is vital. Think about how often a user clicks a submit button, the button visually depresses, but nothing happens. The page doesn't route.
Because there's a silent React exception in the console.
Exactly. Or an API request hanging infinitely. The Sentinel catches that discrepancy. It enforces perfect alignment across the visual DOM, the network payload, and the console output.
And we control this chaos using the ferality dial. Level 1 is passive reconnaissance. stated flows, but level 2 is agitated fuzzing.
The Attitude Era brawler mentality.
Yes. The system intentionally double-clicks submit buttons rapidly before asynchronous spinners can resolve to test race conditions. It injects malformed characters. It acts like a highly frustrated, caffeinated real-world user. And then level 3, maximum virality, agentic override.
Going completely off-leash.
The system reads the page context, invents zero-day edge cases, and bypasses the front end altogether. It takes intercepted network headers, mutates them, and fires malformed API requests directly at the back end to test the structural integrity of the database.
But when you crank the dial to level 3, firing mutated payloads without a map, how does the system avoid getting completely lost in its own chaos?
Through the breathing method of execution, we don't just let the AI run wild. The AI intent sets the direction, the imagination phase. But the Playwright physical I/O acts as the secondary shift.
It locks the insight in place.
Exactly. The system breathes in the context, executes an action, and then explicitly waits for the environment to quiet down, waiting for network requests to finish, before taking the next breath and asking the AI what to do next. The physical constraints tether the AI's imagination to reality.
It stabilizes the surge. It ensures the application is structurally sound and actively respectful of the human OS.
Which brings us to our summary, operator. The Feral Architect framework is a closed loop, self-writing, self-executing, self-diagnosing intelligence. It relies on the Isaac protocol, the absolute preservation of verified historical reality, and a zero-trust architecture to bridge the gap between human nuance and rigid machine verification.
And as we close this audit, remember the Grimoire protocol. Engaging with technology should never be passive consumption. It must be a deliberate ritual that increases your personal autonomy and fortifies your cognitive defenses. You are the sovereign pilot of your own career. Use sector isolation to build a safe harbor.
And protect your local biological environment. Optimize for pet wellness via the Disney Princess Protocol, because the furry node, your physical pets, are a core regulatory requirement for your psychological stability, not a distraction.
I want to leave you, the operator, with a final provocative challenge. Take a hard look at your own operational environment today. Map your daily cognitive stack against the golden schematic. What unhandled exceptions are you currently masking in your own life with a fake test.fixme just to keep your beige suits happy? What institutional rot are you actively accepting to maintain pathological homeostasis? Pull the raw telemetry, name the glitch, own the hardware.
If the X-ray machine is broken, stop staring at the static. Build Sentinel to map the visual void. System audit complete. Keep the air gap secure.